A man can fail many times, but he isn't a failure until he begins to blame someone else. John Burroughs. I'm guessing we've all done puzzles, and we've all known that feeling of the last piece clicking into place. That pressure because the rest of the puzzle pieces are pushing against that last opening. That's what blame feels like. When something goes sideways, that project that fails, your house feels out of whack, or you're just kind of hitting a wall. Pointing a finger at the reason feels like finding the missing piece. It's comforting because it appears to make sense of the chaos. You're not making things up, you're just identifying the obstacles. But we often mistake an explanation for a solution. We think that because we've identified who's at fault, we've actually done something about the situation. And we haven't. We've just built a logical cage and crawled right inside of it. We're standing in the rain, identifying that the clouds are the cause of the water, while we slowly get soaked to the bone. It's time to stop being right and start being effective. Because while blame is often accurate, it's almost always useless. If you're sitting there waiting for the person who broke it to fix it, or waiting for the world to get easier before you take the next step, you've surrendered the only thing that actually matters: making your own decisions. You've traded your power for the temporary satisfaction of complaining. And frankly, that's a losing trade every time. Think about the last time something went not as intended. You probably looked around the room or thought about who else was involved, chose the most obvious culprit, and pinned the why on them. We do it because our brains are wired for efficiency, not necessarily for the truth. When we're stressed or overextended, we don't have the bandwidth for a deep dive, so we take the first exit that's available. If the report is late, it's because someone on the other team didn't do their part. If you're constantly arguing with someone, it's because they don't understand you. Feels accurate, right? Like you've diagnosed the issue, but in reality, it's what's referred to as attribution bias. We're all really good at seeing the flaws in everyone else's processes, while being blind to the gaps in our own. It's easy to look at a teammate and say, they're the bottleneck. But it's much harder to ask if your instructions were clear, or if you provided the resources that they needed with enough time for them to complete their task. We see their output as the problem, but we ignore our piece of the chain that led up to it. When you stop at blame, you're looking at the last link in the chain and acting as if it's the only one that's important. Maybe they did mess up. Let's say they're 100% at fault. Even then, focusing only on their failure is like looking at a broke-down car and saying, the engine stopped. Okay, sure, but why'd it stop? Was it a lack of oil? Was it a faulty part? Was it because service was skipped? Identifying a cause is easy. Understanding the whole situation is where the actual leadership happens. If you want to move the needle, you've got to move past the shortcut of who did this and start looking at the system that allowed it to happen. Here's another one to consider. Go back to the last time you were stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. Eventually, you made it through. Then you see it. A car crash several lanes over. You found the why. You got your explanation. You might even go as far as assuming that it was the fault of that driver that just added 30 minutes to your commute. And the thing is, you might be correct. But does whether the driver caused the accident or not move your car any closer to your destination? No, not at all. This is the trap we fall into every single day. We spend all our mental energy constructing the perfect case for why we're stuck. But explanation and direction are two completely different animals. Explanation looks backwards. It's an autopsy of a failure. Direction looks forward. It's the navigation system for what's coming ahead. If you stop at who caused this, you're just a historian of your own problems. The shift happens when you force yourself to ask a more productive question. What changes now because I know that? If you know someone is unreliable with deadlines, okay, that's the explanation. Now, what's the direction? Do you build in a buffer? Do you change the workflow? Do you have that crucial conversation? Knowing they're the problem doesn't fix the situation. It just gives you the data that you need to make a different move. You don't need more reasons why things are hard. You need a direction that gets you through the mess. However, there's often a misunderstanding when people talk about taking ownership. It usually sounds like some hyper-aggressive mantra where you have to be someone who controls the weather, the economy, and the moods of everyone in your life. Hate to break it to you, that's not ownership. That's a delusion. If you try to take responsibility for things you literally cannot move, you're not being a high performer. You're setting yourself up for a nervous breakdown. Real internal control isn't about denying reality. It's about being surgical with where you place your focus. Think of it more as selective ownership. You have to be able to look at a mess and say, I didn't cause the storm. That's your reality. Acknowledge it. But then you immediately pivot to the workable ground. You own the decision to remain in the storm or find shelter. When you have a strong internal locus of control, you aren't claiming that you can control every outcome. You're affirming that your response to every outcome is yours. This is the buffer that keeps you from drowning when life gets heavy. If you believe everything is happening to you, then you're a victim, and victims don't take initiative. They wait to be rescued. But if you believe there's always a lever that you can pull, even if it's a small one, then you stay in the game. The strongest move you can make isn't trying to shoulder the weight of the entire world. It's identifying the exact piece of the problem that belongs to you and then dominating it. Stop wasting your bandwidth on the impossible variables and focus on the workable. When you claim the parts of the situation that you can actually influence, the uncontrollable parts start to matter a lot less. But before we continue, let's take a break and give me a moment to talk about some changes that are coming to these episodes. These episodes are getting a new home. They're getting their own podcast. I'm also going to rebrand it. It's going from the Mindset Debrief to the Standard Within. For the remainder of March, these episodes will be posted under the Transition Drill podcast, as well as under their own podcast, The Standard Within. Then, starting in April, they will only be available under the Standard Within. Nothing about the concept or the context of the episodes is changing. I'm simply separating them off to allow for better organic discovery as their own entity. The name rebrand, that's for a little better separation from the other podcasts with similar names. I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. If you like watching the episodes, please go subscribe to the Standard Within channel on YouTube. Again, starting in April, the episodes will only be released on the Standard Within channels. And if you're already subscribed, you won't miss out on any new episodes. However, this would be a huge help for me. By already having followers come April, that will also help the new episodes get pushed to a larger audience. So please, help me out, go subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to these episodes. Send me your feedback on whatever you like or what I should consider changing. All right, let's get back into this episode. In those moments when your world starts cracking, when you're staring at a significant mistake or an issue, maybe a deadline you missed or a relationship that's strained, you feel the heavy weight of uncertainty. Maybe you feel embarrassed or you feel helpless. And that's an agonizing place to be. So your brain does what it's designed to do. It looks for an exit. Pointing a finger is that exit. The second you can say, it's someone else's fault, or the system is rigged against me, that internal pressure valve pops. The discomfort of not knowing what to do next is replaced by the certainty of knowing who's at fault. It gives your mind a place to land. It's like a mental weighted blanket. If we didn't get that hit of relief, we wouldn't do it so often. So if you find yourself seeking to blame, don't beat yourself up. You're just being human. You're trying to soothe the sting of a situation that feels out of your control. But here's the thing about that relief. It's a sedative, not a cure. It numbs the pain of the problem, but it doesn't address the source of the problem. That urge to blame comes from a place of stress. It's a shield. But once that initial shock wears off, you have to be willing to set the shield down. You have to look past the comfort of being right and ask if you'd rather be right or you'd rather be moving. The real danger of blame is stagnation. It's that slow, steady drift into a state where you're no longer adapting to the world because you're too busy keeping score on how and why the world is unfair. When you stay in that loop, rumination starts to replace action. You find yourself rehearsing the same arguments in your mind, into the mirror, proving over and over again why you're the victim of someone else's incompetence. Resentment settles in like a thick fog, and suddenly helplessness isn't just a feeling, it's your default setting. You've stopped looking for the workable and started looking for the more evidence that supports your case. This is how high performers become former high performers. They don't lose their talent. They just lose their grip on the steering wheel because they're too busy yelling at the car that cut them off 3 exits back. The leverage point here is simple, but incredibly difficult. You have to notice when blame has stopped being a reaction and started becoming an identity. It's like your operating mode. You can tell you're there when your first thought in any crisis is, who did this? Rather than, what did I do? If your stories always end with you being right and everyone else being wrong, you're just narrating your own decline. The moment you catch yourself in that loop, you have to break the glass. You have to realize that every second you spend perfecting your explanation is a second you aren't spending on your direction. Stagnation is a choice disguised as a justified complaint. Don't let a temporary setback become a permanent identity. The world doesn't care if you're right. It only cares if you're still moving. So here's the truth. And it's a hard truth. You can be the most right person in the room and still be the one who loses. You can have a mountain of evidence proving that the system failed, that your boss is incompetent, or the timing was a disaster. And all of that can be factually true. But if you're using that truth as a reason to stand still, you aren't being a realist. The standard is about being responsible for what happens next. It's about that split second where you feel the urge to point outward and you choose instead to look at the tools currently in your hands. That's where your power lives. It doesn't live in the past, and it certainly doesn't live in the hands of the people who let you down. It lives in the workable. Stop looking for a villain to explain your circumstances and start looking for the leverage to change them. The moment you stop asking, who's at fault, and start asking, what's my move? The entire game shifts. You go from being a victim within the noise to the leader of the signal. Take back your sense of control. Own the direction. Ignore the distractions and get back to work. Because the world doesn't reward the person with the best excuse. It rewards the person who stayed in the arena when the excuses ran out. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes with me. Until next time, stay sharp, stay grounded, and keep showing up. Oh, and don't forget to sign up or follow the new podcast.